Hawaii POV, a talk story series. I'm Kathy with a K, and I have Dale Machado.
Hello. Kind of momentous you're doing this today. April 18, 1977 was when I was hired at KGMB Radio, which became KSSK.
Let's start with where you're originally from. Where are you originally
I
from?
was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. Lived in Punch Bowl area and went to local schools. Went to
What local schools, like public school?
no Catholic school.
Local Catholic
Well, I
school.
mean local in Hawaii. I mean, you know, so grade school and high school. Went to St. Louis High. Well, actually, that's kind of why I'm in radio in a way, is the way high school, well, grade school even, and high school went. I was in the speech club because in 8th grade I won a speech contest. It's a tournament for all the grade schools, I guess, on Oahu. I guess the nuns at Cathedral School, where I was going, for some reason thought I would be good in the speech contest. I have no idea why.
Were you chatty as a kid?
I guess, Portuguese, couldn't help it, right? So remember, this is in 1963,
Okay.
and I did a storytelling thing called Burr Fox and the Tar Baby. But it's in dialect, which wouldn't be too PC right now, but it was like, did the fox ever catch the rabbit, Uncle Remus, and I did that in dialect, and I won. 15 years later, this guy was working at the radio station just for a short amount of time. The first time he saw me, he goes, "My God, you beat me in storytelling!" And it was Rap Replinger, or the speech club at the high school level anyway. Tournaments on Saturdays at various high schools. And the thing is, I never did anything as good as that, I did humorous interpretation, I did debate. The other famous, not famous, but I mean notable thing maybe was that in my senior year in high school, my debate partner was Dean Pitchford. He won an Oscar for the song What a Feeling, Flashdance. He was just in school, yeah. He was my debate partner. He went to St. Louis also, class of 68. 50th anniversary this year. Senior year, you have your conference with the teacher saying, okay, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I just thought, well, radio, speech, maybe I'd go into that. I found out once I got into radio that they didn't like my voice, because it's not your typical radio voice.
Give us a time frame.
1970, well, I was still in college in the 70s. The first real radio job was at KORL, 650 AM. People Power. It was a talk station. 24 hours of local talk, which is amazing that they even did that. And I was the production guy. I was a production genius, man. I worked with tape recorders and editing in a splice blocks, and I made all the commercials. And I grabbed all the voices that were on the air. They didn't do production, I did the production, and they were just the voices. And that's how I started anyway in professional radio. I did do a DJ stint at KTUH before that. Once I finally got into radio and I realized they didn't want my voice particularly, except for funny voices, I can do those. So I thought, well, what else can I do? And then somehow I thought I could be an engineer. Previously to that, I thought engineers were just the nerdy guys, and I was not smart enough to do that. And it was more than just working with the equipment, it was fixing the equipment. I always really liked it when the guys who came in to fix stuff, they would open the board and they'd look inside, what's wrong with this thing? And they'd put, and I want to do that. I want to be the guy that people say, oh, he can do it, he can fix it, and eventually I did. Once I got to KGMB Radio, which became KSSK Radio, my first job was with Akuhead Pupule, who was Hal Lewis, who was a legend in his own time, actually. And he was the guy before Perry and Price. And once I got to that job, I realized, okay, this is a dead-end job, because once Aku retires or whatever, what am I going to do? At that point, I was just still a production guy.
Okay.
Still a production. I did Aku's production.
Okay. So what was that like working with Mr. Hal Lewis?
Well, it was incredible, actually. He was really funny. He was also really self-centered and an ego guy. But I mean, to be what he was, you had to be. He liked me because I never questioned him.
Oh.
I said, okay, whatever you want, you know. It was a really good learning experience. I really learned about how somebody can do a radio show and make it interesting.
How did you get assigned to him, or did he pluck you out saying, you walking in the hall?
I applied for a job at KGMB Radio, and I told him, you know, application. It was, you know, I told him what my experience was. I even sent him a tape.
Of your voice?
Of my voice, yes. And then I got a call from the program director.
Who was that at the time?
His name was George Kennedy.
Okay.
Not the actor, but same name. And this guy actually did some acting. He was in local theater productions, and he was in 5-0, you know, the first 5-0.
Okay.
Anyway, he called me in, and I don't think I came in more than once, and he said, okay, you're hired. You're going to work with Aku. And that's when I went, Aku. I remember Aku when I was a little kid. Aku was always on he was on TV.
Okay.
He was on the radio, you know, of course. Yeah, to me, he was like, big deal. This was a big deal. Actually, it's weird. My first memory of radio was the TV, because there was this disc jockey named Kini Popo.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. And he did a radio show, but they put it on TV. So it was a camera in his studio.
Oh, wow.
Watching him do his show. And this was in the 50s, I think.
Where was it being broadcast from?
I can't remember what station. It might have been KGMB Radio, but I don't remember. But it was like, that was fascinating because, you know, I mean, some people would say, wow, how boring watching a DJ do a show, right? But
well, nowadays it's Howard Stern. I mean, there's so many, The Breakfast Club.
Yeah,
You know, a lot of syndicated programs have
TV too, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, this was like one guy doing all this weird stuff, and he had, I don't know, I don't remember specifically what he did, but like I know that a lot of those guys would have bells and whistles, actual physical things, you know. And so it was kind of cool. That was my first memory of radio. But then in my high school days is my next real memory. And I would listen to rock and roll radio. I'd listen to K-Poi for sure.
Okay, so
K-Poi was big. 1380 K-Poi.
And who was the?
Well, Tom Moffat.
Was he anchoring? Was he in the morning or?
No, he was in the afternoon. Ron Jacobs was in the morning.
Oh wow!
And I think like somebody like Tom Rounds maybe was in the middays. There was also Dave Donnelly was on the radio too, who became Mr. Checkers later on, if you remember that. I would say more the 60s, the like 63, 64. I was 14, 15. And then around 16, I really got into, you know, the music. Of course, the Beatles. I love the Stones more than the Beatles. You know, there was always this thing, the Beatles or the Stones.
Right.
But I like the more rootsy sound of the Stone.
Was it because it was more obvious blues impact and folk? And
Totally the blues. Yeah, that's what I really like.
Which was that? Which album? Then it was like a lot of the 45s, the singles. It wasn't the albums being pushed.
Yeah, it was the singles. You know, the last time, baby, it's the last time. I don't know. That was one of them. Later on, I actually worked at this record distributor. I was in college by then, I think. They distributed London Records, which was the Stones label.
Yeah.
And I got all this old stuff, and even more, I liked them, yeah. It was definitely listening to the radio. Around 1966, I used to actually tape it. I had a little tiny little tape, reel-to-reel tape recorder.
Yes.
The kind that if you ever watched the old Mission Impossibles, they would blow up, you know, like that. So I would like put the microphone on the speaker and just tape it like that.
Was that a commonplace thing, or did you have to be an audiophile to
I don't
ask for that for Christmas or to
I don't
spend money
know.
on
I
that?
don't remember how I got it. Kind of an aside. Years later, my mom's house, and kind of looked in the, you know, the closet, all the old stuff, and I found the tape recorder, and I brought it to the radio station and tried to play it on one of our reel-to-reel machines.
And it worked?
And it worked, and it was Dick Wainwright. It was incredible.
Amazing. So you had taped one of his shows?
Yes,
Oh my
because he used to
gosh.
work for KPOI. And I think he was on KKUA then, at that
Wow.
point. It was Dick Wainwright introducing The White Room by Cream.
Oh my gosh.
I played it for him. He flipped out. He told me these stories, but when he was starting out, he would he cut out of school to go be a DJ on the radio. Yeah, the Dick Wainwright Surf Reports on KPOI was the first time I ever heard of him.
Wow.
Yeah, and that must have been 65, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because did you want to be
In the
Keith
radio?
Richards?
Yeah, see, I didn't learn how to play guitar until I was 19. But I already had the desire to do something in music, but I wasn't sure what. I liked Paul Revere and the Raiders. I liked that band. You know, I like to go to dances, but I didn't like to dance. I just liked to watch the band and wish I was in the band.
Yeah,
you know. I used to hang around with people that we'd go to people's house and play music, and just jam, but I didn't play yet. We knew this guy that played surf music. He had these, it's a Japanese copy of a Stratocaster kind of guitar, but it was a twangy guitar. And he knew all these surf songs. His parents are there. I mean, it wasn't like, any kind of late night thing or anything. I'd want to do something, so I ended up playing the Ottoman. So, so I was playing drums on the Ottoman, boom. And then I got sick of that. I said, no, I want to learn how to play guitar. So I ended up learning. That's how I learned. And the first guitar I had was a Contessa.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
An acoustic? That sounds like an acoustic.
Acoustic guitar, cheap Japanese guitar, but still good. And I had previously fooled around on the ukulele, and I had changed the strings to make it left-handed. And so I felt like I would progress faster if I just did the same thing on the guitar. And that's how I ended up playing left-handed with the strings changed so that it's like the bass strings are closest to your face, the treble strings are closest to your feet that way.
Was it through books or just from seeing bands playing live?
It was just with friends, first of all, by ear and learning from friends, basic chords and stuff like that. Pretty much folk music, finger picking. Had some friends that were really good, and we'd go play with them and just kind of be in awe. My friend was better than me, but after a while, though, I learned about the blues scale and how you can play blues. And then all of a sudden, I got really good. I mean, relatively at the time, but I was, I progressed pretty fast at one point, and I started thinking, hey, man, hot stuff. In fact, speaking of the Stones, the first lead guitar solo that I learned was Keith Richards' solo, Sympathy for the Devil. I mean, it's like a screaming guitar, real trebly, and it's, looking back now, it's fairly easy to learn. But at the time, when I got it down, it was like, wow, man, I did that. So then, I started playing music, 19, still in college, not knowing what the hell I wanted to do. Ended up majoring in speech communication. And the last year of college, I think it was just the last year, maybe the last 2 years. I had the choice, speech communication department, then they split it up. Then it became a communication or speech, or you could keep them both. I did keep them both, but I did want to kind of concentrate on radio, just because I thought radio would be easier to get into. Like TV, you could have had TV also. But TV seemed to be so many people involved, you couldn't just do a show, or you couldn't just put something out on the air by yourself. You had to have a director and a this and that, So I don't know why I thought that would be cooler, but I thought that radio would be just more immediate, I guess, or something.
While you were at the University of Hawaii at Manoa,
Yes.
did you get a shift on KTUH?
I did. But actually, I learned more from this class. Terry Zahn was his name. He was on Channel 4 as a news anchor in the early 70s, so it was a while ago. But he had been a DJ. And he also was an adjunct professor at UH teaching communication. He ended up building a radio studio, put together 2 radio studios, a production room and a kind of an on-air room.
Oh, so that got created while you were
Well, I was
there.
I was there, yeah. You know, I was kind of in the middle of it. I didn't actually help or anything. He did it during a summer, and then it was really great. Reel-to-reel machines, the whole deal. So I learned how to do radio production from that. That's how I got my first radio job, from that experience. FM wasn't coming in yet, but it was getting there. You know, KPOI FM was the first one that I remember. Harvey Weinstein, yeah.
Harvey's Corner.
Harvey's Corner. I used to listen to him all the time. They would play album-oriented rock.
AOR.
As it came to be known. You know, before it was kind of like underground music, you know, because the AM stations wouldn't play that stuff. But AM had rock and roll. AM was where the Beatles were. AM was, you know, the Stones were on the AM. The AM radio had the hits. But it was, you know, already coming to be top 40. Playlists were getting shorter and shorter. This was probably before research. It wasn't as free, you know.
There was a shift in how radio was being presented.
Yeah. So FM, almost when it first came out, maybe it was a throwaway. People didn't realize how important it would eventually get. I think caught on was the album, you know, the rock and roll on FM. That made it more like people start listening to it a little bit, you know. And of course, you got to remember this is the 60s and the whole, you know, hippie thing and everything.
I've read about it.
You've read about it.